Today's webinar is titled Best Practices for High Stakes Examination Preparation, presented by Terrie Godde, Education Stakeholder Relations Program Manager for the National Registry of EMTs. I'm going to pass it over to Terrie now. Terrie, thank you so much for being here with us today to share your knowledge and experience with us, and we look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Rio, so much. Thank you all for joining us today. When I was putting this together, I thought I was doing some research, and that's a pretty big title. Really, probably a better title would just be Effective Study Habits. And it's something not just for students, it's something we as educators can learn. I am a longtime paramedic, a longtime EMS educator. Most recently worked in the state EMS office in Michigan and started with the National Registry here this year in April. So, one of my projects I really wanted to do, working with program directors, EMS educators, clinical coordinators, is really come up with programs that can help us all be successful. So, that's where this began. This little ride began. So let me try my slides, and it looks like it worked. So, one of the quotes that I found, preparation is the key to success. Really, the broad goal of health professions education is to foster those meaningful, motivated learning. And that's what we are trying to do, not just for students to pass a test, but to have that lifelong learning to really understand how just effective habits are going to make their life a little bit easier. So when I started researching, I found the same three things, those three things on the left, that are in every research, every book about physical health, about mental health, also about study habits. Good sleep. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Anybody in EMS and public safety in general, and healthcare, sleep is a thing that we all probably deal with. But good sleep is a habit that is very effective in remembering things. Having a healthy breakfast every day and exercise. Now, exercise doesn't mean join a gym. It could be just a 5 or a 10 minute walk before you sit down and really start to study, something that will help refresh your brain. The three things on the right, though, are difficult for some people. It's important that we as educators talk to our students and really establish with them that it is okay to ask for help. You're going to have students who maybe just got out of high school or college where study habits are pretty easy to them. But you're also going to have students that have been out of school and out of practice for a long time. So it's important that they understand that it is okay to ask for help. And then the next one, don't panic. Now, it's pretty hard to tell somebody who is in the middle of a panic attack not to panic. But it's important that we recognize some of these things at the beginning so that they can really focus on not panicking, so that they're ready for not just our tests, but for practice. And then practice. Practice, we know, makes perfect. There's not a superstar anywhere that just became a superstar because they're just that awesome. They've had to practice to be there. We've had to practice teaching before we started teaching, or practice our practitioner duties before we went out on the road. So we all have to practice, and practice does make perfect. I don't know about perfect, but helps us all do better. So no matter where you look for guidance, you're going to see these best practices. So let's talk more about overall preparedness prior to getting to those high stakes exams. Is there are these 6 items. One is we all probably need to learn how to create habits. We probably all have some bad habits. I know I have plenty. But really creating a habit of studying. Now, it would be unrealistic to believe that anyone would have an hour or 2 hours every single day of their life to devote to studying. So, what if instead, maybe at 10 o'clock every evening, the kids are to bed, life is okay. I know that I can study for 15 or 20 minutes every day at 10 p.m. Maybe getting into that habit is a little more realistic. 15, 20 minutes a day is going to make all the difference in the world for them to be successful in the class. The next thing is to not cram. I'm going to go over a little more of that in a little more detail here in a few minutes, but cramming doesn't help. I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir here. We've all crammed for an exam. Um, of course, this presentation is going to try to talk you out of doing that. Prepare early, get to class early, be that successful student that studies at the same time every day and spends that 15 or 20 minutes every single day. That's preparing early. Sleeping well, again, it's a priority to sleep well. Arriving early. How many of you know somebody who is never early or arrives late for everything? There are those people. There are resources for them to learn time management better. I'll go over a couple of websites that I usually go to. It doesn't mean it's the be all end all, but maybe helping students really get into those time management habits. And then experiencing and practicing those positive rituals instead of, oh, I've got an exam on Tuesday and I am not ready for it. Maybe instead, spending that 15 or 20 minutes every day, ending it with a positive ritual. This is what I learned today, and I'm going to nail that exam. If they can practice that, they're going to do better. Rather than having that test anxiety, they're going to be prepared. Dr. Herman Ebbinghaus, he wrote the book on memory. He's actually the person who defined it. He was a psychologist in the 1800s. His book is titled Memory, and he wrote that in 1885, so just a few years ago. But you can find a lot of information about memory and memorization just from his link. If you go to practicalpi.com, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. But if you look at this, what he's saying when we're cramming for information and you have that 100% of the information that you retained from cramming, in 20 minutes, you're only going to retain just over 50%. At 24 hours, just over 25%. And then you can see a month later, less than 25% of what you crammed for that you remember. There's this book titled Moonwalking with Einstein. I brought that. I'm not sure how well my camera's working because the background is in blur mode. It's only about 270-ish pages. Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. Really a good book. Not a long read, not something I would have picked out, but a friend of mine recommended this book to me. Very good. Really all about remembering things. And that's what he wanted to do. Within a year's time, this guy was um, he was in contests on what he can remember after 1 year of practice. But this book, what Joshua Foer says, is when you want to get good at something, how you spend your time practicing is far more important than the amount of time you spend. And if you can really hit that home with your students, they're going to be more successful. It, again, it would be unrealistic to think that anybody has one single full hour or 2 hours to put aside every day to study. It'd be great, but not everybody's life can afford that. But that 15 or that 20 minutes, and if it's done right, they're probably going to remember just as much as they would if they had that hour or 2 hours to do that. So if we can focus on that, that'd be great. The next thing I looked up were what are some good techniques on memorization? We've all had to do it. There's so many techniques out there. And when I was really searching for some good techniques, I came across this one, 11 of them. Now, there's plenty, if you Google this, there are plenty of techniques out there that are 20, 25, 30. Well, by the time you remember all those techniques, you forgot what you were trying to memorize, right? So these 11 I thought were pretty good. The first one is acronyms and acrostics. If you're having trouble coming up with acronyms, maybe this is where you could use an AI platform. Get into AI and say, these are the words I need to remember, make an acronym, and boom. Within 10 seconds or a couple seconds, you'll have an acronym that you can start using. Your brain is going to pull on that. We all know EMS and healthcare in general has a million acronyms that we remember. The DCAP, BTLS, we have to sit there and go through each one of those, or the OPQRSTs, right? Um, what is an acrostic? An acrostic maybe is something like a word puzzle. Again, that's something that an AI program can help you with. You just have to make sure that the information is correct. But if you put the information in and say, do this better or create a word puzzle using these words and definitions, bam, you've got it. So the next one would be music mnemonics. You know, we all have learned to practice CPR with the song Staying Alive, and we can remember that, right? We all sing that song, or washing our hands to the song Happy Birthday. Music mnemonics are big. I did this talk at NAEMSE in August, and I said, ask the group, what is Jenny's phone number? How many of you remember Jenny's phone number? That'll tell how old you are. I remember Jenny's phone number and often give that out when somebody asks me for my phone number because it's funny. The next is chunking, and the chunking part, I'm like, what is chunking? It's really where you chunk numbers or items together. So maybe double five or 24 instead of 24, um, stuff like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1234. That's chunking. If you can get those words, it may be a little bit longer to say than what you're actually looking for, but that's okay if you can make it a memory. And then it talks about memory palace. And honestly, this book, and if you look through, um, you can Google this, memory palace. There is so much research out there about memory palaces. It's amazing. It's where you place images with the memories that you're creating, where you're mapping out a physical space here in your brain to focus on that mapped memory. Again, Joshua 4 writes about that memory palace. He's got a lot of those pictures in his brain that he pulls out when he's remembering things. Next is to write it down. Now, I always say, read it, write it, say it out loud. Because when you do that, you're creating a practice, you're creating a memory, and then you're creating a habit. Read it, write it, say it out loud. Next is to use spaced repetition, where you're reviewing the same information but at increasing intervals. What do I need to remember today? And then if you have 5 things you need to remember, not just spend that 15 minutes, but whenever you have a break, whenever you have a minute, you can go over that information. That's going to help you. And I'll show you an example here in a couple minutes. Next is to make visual connection. Put your words into images. Maybe you're trying to remember the bones, or your students are. Maybe having them remember what joints or bones are circular. Obviously, we can all argue that every bone is circular in nature. However, what ones are we really thinking of? You know, the femoral head, the patella, things like that. Something that they can use as a circle and that will work. Next is to share what you're learning. Study together. Whenever you can get students who can study together and share what they're learning, other people have different techniques that help them. And maybe those students that are really kind of reaching out for some help, or maybe trying to learn something that they just haven't been in practice to learn, maybe that can help. We know that sleeping more equals key productivity. Again, I recognize that that's an oxymoron. And then move around. Again, I don't join a gym. And now if you want to join a gym, do it. But for this part, just if you move regularly and then at moderate intensity, it's going to refresh your brain. Joshua Foer has this quote in that book, Moonwalking with Einstein. And I'm going to tell you this from memory because this is something I had to practice a lot. And at the end, there are two words that I just could not remember. So I created a memory palace. So what Joshua Foer says in this book is that the brain best remembers things that are repeated, rhythmic, rhyming, structured, and those last two words I just couldn't think of until I started doing this. Easily visualized. Those are the last two words. So your brain remembers things that are repeated, rhythmic, rhyming, structured, and easily visualized. That's my memory palace. I really like that quote because it's pretty accurate. And these 11 memorization techniques will hopefully help your students with their study habits. There's another book I'm going to recommend to you and I know it has been recommended on several of the NAEMSE webinars called Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning. Again, I have a copy of this book. It's a book I think every instructor should have. It's not a long read. So many examples in this book, but Peter Brown really kind of got that. And what he says is reflection is a form of practice. Memorize or write down lessons learned every day. Now, this isn't just for your students. This should be for all of us, right? What's the learned content every day or the lessons that you need to remember? And then focus on how you're going to remember them. That's going to help train your brain. If you do this every day, you're going to help create that habit. So it's important to make sure that you have this process correct. Reflection should be, again, a part of every day. Find a way to make it stick. Simply by reading it, writing it, saying it out loud. Where have I heard that before? But then continue this process until you've created that habit and it's easily retrievable in your brain. Again, a very good book that I think every educator should have read. Here's a little bit more on Memory Palace. Memory palaces, they help speed recall, and simple words or phrases can represent the complex concepts, or higher volumes of information. Maybe you associate blue with your blue bedding. You need to remember something that's blue, and the picture in your brain is your bedding because it's blue, or whatever. Maybe it just helps you remember that. So this technique goes by many names. It used to be called the Roman room system, or may still be in some cultures. The journey method, the method of loci is another one. And you may have even heard it referenced such in such a way as a mind palace, a memory palace. Mnemonic techniques can help that you can use to improve memory retention and recall, mentally placing that information to be remembered in a specific location. Again, you need to remember things that are blue. Think of your bedding. Mentally walk through that space to retrieve the information when needed. I gave this example when I did this presentation about just when you get up in the morning, what do you do? What is your habit that you do every morning? Do you go and make a pot of coffee? You probably don't even have to think twice about it because it just has become a habit. If you can get these study habits through to your students, that it'll be just like making a pot of coffee when you get up in the morning. Um, it can be that easy, but it does take practice. So, how do we build a memory palace? Well, first is to determine what you need to memorize. Then, the location you're going to choose for your memory palace. It should be somewhere you're familiar with. You'll not usually construct a new location, but instead associate those ideas or those words with existing place. Somewhere maybe that you go often, uh, maybe your house or your yard or the coffee shop or whatever. Maybe it's your favorite TV show or video game. And then plan a route to get there, a route around the room or the space in your memory palace location. And then after you have your location and route, assign that information. What information do you need to remember and what's going to be there? So, what's going to be in your coffee pot? Um, that kind of thing. Making overly exaggerated mental images in your mind can help to improve recall. And a key to making your memory palace work is repetition. So, visit those memory palaces regularly. Now, when I was talking about the moonwalking with Einstein and Joshua 4, it's not like he started remembering everything in a year. It really took a lot of practice for him to create those memory palaces to remember things. If he were to visit us today, in 2 years down the road, he would remember that today was a Tuesday. Maybe that I was wearing my black registry shirt, polo shirt. Maybe he remembers that we met from 1 to 2 p.m. That is building a memory palace. And that's what he's been able to do with a lot of practice. So, what can we do? One is to develop a study plan. How much time is really reasonable to study every day? When you talk to your students, some of them may have that hour or two every day in their life that's available to them, but some of your students just don't. So when you create a study plan or help them create their study plan, it's got to be realistic. What really can they do? What can they give up or what can they focus on? How much time? So then, what about studying together? Maybe if you have class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe Thursdays are just really busy days. Maybe your students can get together, some of them on Tuesdays from 5 to 5:30, where they could study together. And other students maybe on Thursdays they can do. You have to work together to get them to study together. And it's important to always take breaks. You have to take not just a physical break to clear your brain, take a little walk, but also just a mental break from studying. And then eliminate distractions. Now, I know that there's people that are here on this webinar or listening to the recording that can function just fine through a workday with chaos all around them. I personally am not that person. I have learned from working in an office, I need quiet to get my job done. It is so quiet you could hear a pin drop where I work. And then if there's a noise somewhere, it always gets my attention. For me, I don't like noises when I'm working. I'm fine with them outside of work. But others in here are fine with those distractions, and that's okay. Whatever works for you. And make sure that your students understand that too. Many of them are parents of children that are very loud, and their only opportunity to study is whatever time of day, and the kids are going bonkers, off the wall kind of stuff. If that works for them, then do it. And then set goals. What do you want to learn this? What do you want to learn this week? And how can you get all of the information to be retained in your brain from this week? And then organize. There's so many resources out there to help with. We talked about time management a little bit ago. Um, Also, maybe self-confidence, how to study better, all kinds of information that would help a student who's really kind of needs some improvement in those areas. Mind Tools, mindtools.com is one I go to often, and I would use that to help my students get better with those kind of subjects. The self-confidence, that was a big one. Time management is another one. Purdue Global is another resource. NAEMSE has a lot of resources on their website. But we can find ways to help our students. And of course, the whole goal of this is to help them be successful. If they're successful, you're successful. Most importantly, it's to care for those people that they're going to be responding to when they're in the field. And that's what all of our goals should be focused on, right? One question I want to ask you is, do you have a mentorship program? A mentorship program should be structured, and it should have those clear goals and expectations. Next is, do you have open lab hours to help students? So maybe your students have that Tuesday from 5 to 5:30, and they really want to come in and use the open lab hours. There should always be an instructor present during open lab hours, even if it's a student's just practicing, because you want to make sure that they're practicing everything correctly. Because the first time they do it, they're starting to create a habit. So it's important that we do that. Have that communication, the collaboration, the coaching, and your students, again, will be successful. In turn, makes you successful. Most importantly, the people that they're caring for will be happy and hopefully healthy. One of the things that when I was researching for this program came through, and it said, when learning is easy, it's often forgettable. Some things for some of us come to us very easy, and we can remember certain things in the EMT program or the paramedic program that seems to just come easy to us. Often, though, they're forgettable when we do this. So instead, if we start to do the learning, all of us, what if we told ourselves, I'm going to learn 4 new things every day? I'm going to learn something new about the topics at hand. I'm going to know when to use the new information, when not to use the information, write it down. We will all be more successful in life if we do those kind of things. Learn 4 new things every day. If you can set that goal, it's awesome. Utilize study tools and quiz often. That's important for everyone to do, and especially important for your students to make sure that they're retaining the information. Now, I'm going to tell you this story about one of the NAEMSE conferences. Dr. Heather Davis was doing this presentation, and it was really kind of about team-based learning. And she had us all take notes, just like our students take notes. And she read us a slide. This slide had 12 different topics on it, 12 different items, I guess I should say. Now, they were simple items that you find in a store, a button, a puzzle, whatever. So she spoke just like all of us do when we're teaching a class. And she went over the items and said, read them. We wrote down just like taking notes. And then she moved the slide and said, okay, turn your paper over now and write down those 12 items that I just gave you. And most of us could remember maybe five, maybe six. Some smarty pants in there had eight or nine that they could remember. But we didn't really retain the information. We were just in a hurry writing down what she was telling us, right? So the next example was a slide that had 12 items written on there. So just 12 bullet points items, still one word, pen, pencil, that kind of stuff. So we stared at that for 2 minutes. So for 2 minutes, we looked at this slide that had 12 items. Then she moved the slide and said, okay, turn the paper over or get on your paper, write down those 12 items that you just saw in that slide. Now, most of us did better with that. We stared at it for a while. We got to like 9, 10. I don't think anybody in there remembered all 12. Then she had us in front of us, she had placed these small little Ziploc bags that each had 12 items in it. And those 12 items she had us take out, we all had different things, take out those 12 items and put them in alphabetical order in front of us. So we did, a button, a pen, a pencil, a pin, etc. 12 items, put them all in alphabetical order. And then she had us put them all back in the bag and they collected them and nothing. Didn't talk about it again till the end of her presentation. And then she said, now write down those 12 items that you had in your baggie. And almost all of us could remember all 12 items. Why? Well, we had to use more than one part of our brain to remember what we had done. That really gave me a good lesson that day on how I teach. And maybe just talking and reading slides isn't helping the student out any. Really getting them involved in their studies is going to help them remember things and retain information a lot better. So utilize those study tools. And then the other thing I would say is, as an instructor, it's important that we don't trick students. But you just don't want to trick them. The goal is for them to understand the material, not to focus on or be fooled by trick questions. If you expect students to read the chapter prior to class, do you then do a PowerPoint on the same material and reread them stuff that they were supposed to read at home? Because if you do that, they're not going to read those chapters anymore because you're going to read it to them and they recognize that, right? So maybe instead, have them read the materials at home, apply the materials then in practice. Have that team-based learning where they work in small teams. Maybe you're going over airway stuff today. Maybe you have two or three students, and you tell them, I need you to find out all the information you can about nasal cannula. And then this other team of two or three students, get all the information you can about non-rebreathers, indications, contraindications, side effects, blah, blah, blah. Then maybe this one suction, and then this one a BVM, and then this team do all that. What if you did that and then your students taught everyone how to do those? So they come back to class after learning everything they that we would need to know. Of course, you're there to help them. And then they teach about those items that they've learned. They're going to learn a lot more from doing something like that than they are from reading a book or having you read the book. And it's important that we as educators really understand that and really try to focus um, our information better. Effective feedback is important. It's descriptive, it's focused on learning, and it has open-ended questions. So maybe it's something short and sweet when they're practicing. Maybe what are the three things you learned? What are the two things that you liked? And what's the one thing that you still want to learn a little more about? If you focus on things like that every day, your students are going to be successful, and you will be. Mhm. It's important as educators also to remember that your experience is not going to be the student's experience. And we all have those good war stories that we like to tell, but it's important that we're teaching to the standards. One of the things to prepare your students for before those high stakes exams, before they take their National Registry exam to become certified, um, every one of our questions comes from materials that are the practice analysis. Those are completed and defined, and they define the current daily practice. The BLS practice analysis is EMRs and EMTs, and the ALS is for AEMTs and paramedics. So, where do they get that information from? How do we know what people are actually doing in the field, each level? Well, reviewing millions and millions of electronic patient care records. That's exactly what is done. So this practice analysis, it had experts from around the country, and by experts, I mean our research team. I mean you. Many people probably on this call have participated in a practice analysis or will in the future, and that's exciting. Um, Nobody likes to write patient care records. None of us, not a single one of us, likes to write reports. I'm pretty comfortable saying that 100% of us would rather not do that. But the importance of writing good, effective, documented reports is just imperative. And we as educators need to explain that to our students. We had one program in Michigan, and it was an agency-based program. And what they would do, their students had to write a PCR for every call they went on their clinicals. So they left the patient information out, obviously, but wrote the report just as though they were the EMT or the medic on the call. And it was the billing office who graded those EPCRs. If it was something that was reimbursable, it was a good, well-written report. The other thing that they compared it to were the hospital records, making sure that the hospitals, that the EMT and the paramedic students were writing the reports the way that they should be written. It's a pretty effective way to make sure that your students document well. So maybe you could focus a little bit more on that. Um, One of the things I wanted to go over in this too is there's some myths out there, and one common myth that we hear a lot at the National Registry are that the questions are too hard. Um, just know that all items are referenced and supported with a rationale. They're pre-tested, piloted, and that gathers the statistical data to make sure that one, they're not too hard or too easy, that they're able to discern between those high achieving and low achieving candidates. And the stats will tell us if the candidates are guessing. It's that minute. Exams have to have all difficulty levels. So, are you practicing that in the classroom? And maybe that's something you could focus a little more on is how you write your exam items, whether it's a module exam or even quiz items. How are they written? If you've never gone to nremt.org and scroll down to the volunteer button, click on there and participate in being on a panel, an item writing panel or a clinical judgment panel. We're always looking for help, and we have people from all over the country that do this, practicing medics, practicing EMTs, practicing physicians, practicing educators, state office, etc. We also have those English majors that are there helping us make sure that we're writing items correctly. But really, if you train your students to have those good, effective study habits and they know how to take care of a patient, there's no testing tricks needed. It's just good patient care. So, getting that message through to your students is essential for them to be successful. Continuing on the common myth thing, it's important to know that those items, again, are reviewed by a diverse panel of EMS experts. And who am I calling experts? All of us, anybody that's participating. So, where do we get information from? I already said the practice analysis. Where else? The model clinical guidelines, the American Heart Association. They do the research in the heart and stroke, so it's important to know that. We need to make sure that the items are reasonable and relevant. You know, for any paramedic, unless the practice analysis shows that we're doing, a bunch of crikes in the field. There's really maybe a question or two at the most about a crike, but really not a lot on those. The questions really are taking care of the patient with the type of calls that we're responding to and the care that we're providing in the field. That it's within the provider scope of practice. It's important to know the scope of practice. The national scope of practice you can find just about anywhere. NAEMSE, NHTSA, NASEMSO, you can find it. That it's consistent with that current practice and national guidelines. That it's clinically accurate, that the item is fair, and that it's entry level, meaning that me as a brand new EMT or paramedic walk out the door and I would be able to go on that call and I would be able to take care of that patient. So it doesn't mean it's experienced. Someone with a ton of experience. I talked to a gentleman the other day who's really struggling with the exam, and he said, well, when I took the exam, one of the questions is, what do you do now? Or whatever the situation was. And he said, I would make sure there would be a fire engine there for first response, but that wasn't an option. And I said, well, he goes, because in my world, we have to call for them. I'm like, well, stop thinking in your world and think along the big picture, for everyone, every entry level person and how they're practicing. So that's important that we get through to students too. If they've been an EMT for a long time and now they're going to paramedic school, it's important that they walk out of that paramedic school door and they recognize that maybe they have some experience as an EMT, but they're really a brand new paramedic, and we need to make sure that they can practice at that level. The next thing I want to talk about is the content domain, and it's changed. This year, I believe in June or July, our BLS exams have new content domains. So you can see that the primary assessment is 37 to 41% of the EMR exam. They're going to be asked a lot of questions on that. The other thing to know is that during the practice analysis, It's found that, of course, the number one call that we respond to in the field is trauma. For adults, the number four call is behavioral emergencies. For pediatrics, though, it's number two, which was quite surprising to me. But you can bet there's going to be a lot of questions on behavioral emergencies, and it's important that we understand that. But remember to really go over the primary assessment with them. Don't leave the other ones out, but I'm saying the majority of the EMR exam and the EMT exam are going to be on that primary assessment. This is all on our website, and you're welcome to, screenshot it or do whatever you need to do, copy it down. Again, for primary assessment for EMTs, it's 39 to 43% is that primary assessment. And then when we get to the AEMT, their majority of their questions are going to be those clinical judgment, the scenarios. Each AEMT is going to have one clinical judgment item that counts on their exam, and it's important to know that. There's going to be several questions that go with that particular call that they're responding to. But we've had a lot of good feedback on those clinical judgment scenarios and items, and that's good. And we've noticed that exam pass rates are a little higher, which is very exciting. And you can see with the paramedic, it would have that as well. 34 to 38% are clinical judgment items. And then when you go the pilot items for EMR, there's 30 items on the EMR exam that are being piloted, meaning it's not counting for them or against them. Every single item on the exam that they're being actually tested on are relevant. EMTs get 10 items, AEMTs 35, and paramedic 20. Those pilot items are important because we need to see if our items that actually go on the exam that count for or against a student are going to, or a candidate, are going to be realistic, relevant, etc. We have psychometricians, and those psychometricians analyze the data and approve questions for scoring on future exams. The questions that show poor performance are removed, reviewed, revised, and repiloted. But again, you can go to our website at nremt.org and review the items that are there. We have a bunch on our website that you can take a look at and just make sure that you're writing your exams similar that will help your students be more successful. Just some final thoughts on study habits. If you can get through to your students that good sleep is imperative, it's going to help you be more successful. Avoid distractions. Again, those distractions are whatever is distracting to them. Quiet is probably distracting to a lot of people, but for me, noise is distracting. So again, it's whatever is distracting to them. Set time aside every day to study. If it's 15 to 20 minutes, that's okay. They're still, if they make a habit out of studying 15 or 20 minutes every single day, they're going to be successful. And then do what works for you. Maybe those 11 items, maybe you're good with 10, or maybe you're good with 9 of them. That's cool. Whatever you can do to create those study habits is going to be make you more successful. And that's the important thing that that's the important message we're trying to get across here. Here are the resources that I had in this presentation. This was a fun one, a pretty outside of the box research project for me to go through and find information for. But, honestly, I want you all to be successful. I want your students to be successful. I personally have had to call EMS, about 4 years ago. Both my husband and my mother had cancer, and we had to utilize the system. And I noticed things where the system could have been improved a little bit. But instead of focusing on that, we really focused on how we can do better. And that's true for all of us. We can always do things maybe a little bit better. And hopefully, this presentation helped a little bit today. And that is my talk. So, if anyone has questions, I do see some things in the chat. Go ahead and try to do this. Let me stop my share. And by all means, if you guys have a question, please reach out to me and I will put my contact information here in the chat. And I am here to help all of you guys. So, whatever I can do, please reach out to me. Are there any questions? I think that Rio said that this presentation was recorded and will be on the YouTube channel soon. And I'm not seeing any questions. Well, one of the things that I'm going to work on, as you guys know, we've had some updates to our data. And one of the things I'm going to work on here soon is just reports and how to get good, accurate reports on student outcomes and those kind of things. And I'll be working on that. And then as we've got a work group going nationwide, and this work group is going to start working on a mentorship program, a nice structured mentorship program. And if any of you want to be involved in that, please email me and I will add you to the list. We meet every other month. We just met in September, so our next meeting is in November. And we're going to work pretty hard on this mentorship program. And this is going to help new instructors, new educators around the country. And it's pretty exciting. David is asking about sites with sample questions in the correct format. I would say if you go to our website and our emt.org, you'll find registry questions there. There's quite a few of them on our website, both the EMT and paramedic level questions. So once you look at those, and if you're out looking for a vendor and they're not written that way, then I wouldn't use that vendor. I would find one maybe that is more the way registry writes. Any other questions? Again, don't forget these two books, Moonwalking with Einstein. That really isn't a book that I probably would have picked out at the store, but I am so glad that she recommended this book because holy cow, did I learn a lot about remembering stuff from this book. And then the other one is The Make It Stick by Peter Brown. That's a good one too. Very good one. I'm a firm believer that every educator, no matter what they educate on, should have that book because it really helps you recognize what you can do as an educator to help people with making the lessons stick. Yes, I will put those in the chat. And I need to spell right. A source for building those technology enhanced items. Eric, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to recommend one, but I would look again for a vendor that is creating those and that they're similar to um, the technology enhanced items that we have. Thank you, Rio.
You're welcome. Sorry it was set to hosts and panelists.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a good